I conquered Dean for 5 years. As long as he proposes to me on his birthday, I can stay in this world. But I waited until midnight before I heard the voice of the system. Everything is over. Dean's first love came back today, and he has always been with her. After accompanying me for so long, the system decided to grant me one request. Let me choose my own way to die. So, since I have to leave sooner or later, I want to die in front of Dean. Let him kill me with his own hands. Regret it for the rest of his life. Chapter 1. It's almost midnight, 5 minutes left. Today is my 25th birthday, and it's also the deadline for my conquest. As long as Dean proposes to me today, I can stay. We agreed. Balloons hung in the room, a cream cake on the table, and even bouquets of roses in the corners. Our mutual friends were notified in advance and came to the villa to celebrate. However, from noon to night, Dean's phone never rang. My best friend Lynn held my hand and comforted me. Shirley, don't worry, maybe. Something came up? What could possibly come up? Not long ago, he solemnly promised me word for word. Shirley, I will give you the most perfect proposal in front of everyone. I shook my head. Let our friends go back first. According to the rules, if Dean doesn't return before the end of this day, I will be erased by the system. I really don't want these people who genuinely love me to see me in such a miserable state. Maybe I looked too embarrassed constantly checking the time. With just a few minutes left, the system finally spoke up to remind me. Host, don't wait any longer. I don't know why, the always cold mechanical voice now seemed to carry a hint of indignation. He's not coming. Patricia went back to her country today, and he has been with her, still at the hospital. Patricia is Dean's first love. They grew up together, childhood sweethearts. But she has a congenital heart disease, and her health has always been fragile. She was sent abroad by her parents during high school, and then rarely appeared again. I rubbed my temples, feeling exhausted. Has her illness been cured? No. The system explained to me. But a new technology has just been developed domestically, so she shouldn't need to go abroad again. I see. I can understand. Since the person I truly like has returned, there's no need for us to be entangled anymore. As soon as the system finished speaking, the clock struck midnight. I closed my eyes, waiting for the moment my soul would be detached. However, nearly a minute passed. Nothing happened. I opened my eyes, still in the familiar room, with the messy bouquet, decorations, and lighting. Why am I still here? I submitted an application for you. Your stay in this world will be extended by 24 hours, and at the same time, you can choose your own way to die. Chapter 2. It doesn't sound very interesting. But there's nothing else to do right now anyway. I actually negotiated with the system in an orderly manner about what kind of spectacular way to die tomorrow. Arson, jumping off a building, drowning? Since the evening, the system's voice had become unusually gentle. It's just leaving the current world, and I will help you remove the pain. I nodded. I absent-mindedly opened my phone and scrolled through my social media feed one last time. A new post from Dean's friend popped up. A photo of a sports car. With a short caption. It's been a while since this guy raced around the city center. The power of first love, it's extraordinary. Dean comes from a wealthy and influential family, with businesses all over the country. He grew up in luxury, having everything he wanted since he was a child. Most of his friends are also rich second generation, many of them can be considered playboys. They usually engage in a few things, racing, surfing, or going to bars. After being with me, Dean rarely went to bars anymore. But occasionally, he would still go mountain racing. Until a few years ago, something happened. He hit the guardrail, half of his body covered in blood, and spent half a month in the hospital. After a stern lecture from his grandfather, he completely stopped. He started racing again? I was a bit puzzled and asked the system. Not racing. Patricia suddenly had a heart attack, and he drove her to the hospital, not only running several red lights but also speeding severely. This is the city center. I furrowed my brows, worried that if something really happened, it wouldn't just be him getting hurt, but it could involve others as well. A few minutes passed, and some of our mutual friends with Dean started commenting on this post. Is he crazy? Wasn't he supposed to propose to Shirley yesterday? Why is he out racing? Guys, update your information. Patricia has returned to the country. Dean won't be proposing to Shirley anymore. Watch your language. Leaving aside the proposal, street racing in the city center is just wrong. Exactly, very dangerous. What if he hits someone? Doesn't Dean remember when his grandfather used to beat him with a belt? He's already speeding severely. This guy needs a serious lesson. I grunted. That's enough. I called out to the system. Where is Dean now? He took Patricia to the hospital and is now rushing to get her medicine. All right, then. I've decided how I want to leave this world. I turned the pen in my hand. Instead of causing an accident, really hurting someone else, I'd rather see the expression on his face when he realizes he pushed me into the abyss for his first love. Chapter 3. Dean isn't far from where I am now. That's what the system told me. At first, I didn't react. Later, I thought it through and chuckled self-deprecatingly. I was just being sentimental. It's just that near this villa, there's the largest northern Chinese medicine chain store, where you can find many rare or limited medicines. I used to have stomach problems. Dean would also get up in the middle of the night, throw on a coat and head out to buy medicine for me. Then he would endure a sleepless night, sitting on a small stool in the kitchen, stirring the pot with a fan. He has always been like this. Once he starts treating someone well, he holds them in the palm of his hand. Always thinking about them, worrying about them. Afraid of them, suffering even a little. It's precisely because of those intimate moments we shared. That's why the lack of love is even more apparent. The system asked me if I wanted to take a look. I nodded. Of course. This is the final farewell. There is only one main road leading to the pharmacy. I put on my coat and stepped out. After walking a few hundred meters, I arrived at a T-junction that I must pass through. It's night now, around 8 or 9 o'clock. In winter, the night falls quickly. At this moment, it's already a dark night. The streetlights behind me lit up, casting a dim halo of light. I stood there, and a few butterflies flew by in front of me. At that moment, I was actually hesitant. Should I continue to endure with Dean? It's only 3 or 4 hours away from midnight. I could watch a movie during this time, listen to the songs I want to hear, or go to the beach to pick up some seashells. These would all be the last, nice, and rare memories I leave in this world. Shirley. It was the voice of the system. This time, it surprisingly didn't call me the host, but called me by my name. I responded and reflexively raised my head. The bright light. In the distance, a silver-white sports car was speeding towards me. It was Dean's car. He was going too fast. I shielded my eyes, the high beams were almost blinding me. Are you sure about this? Yes. Because I saw a little girl with a backpack, just about to cross the road. Chapter 4. The light was too dazzling. After a few seconds, I finally noticed the girl on the road. She had her hair tied in a ponytail, wearing the uniform of a nearby elementary school. She looked like a first or second grader, small and short, with large headphones covering her ears. Holding a phone, chatting with someone. Her fingers were typing, a smile on her face. She couldn't see what was happening around her. Even if Dean noticed the child. At the speed he was driving, slamming on the brakes immediately wouldn't have been enough. The huge inertia would have sent the child flying, resulting in terrible consequences. In that moment, I hardly thought of anything. Hurry, go. I ran over and threw myself forward. I heard a sharp scream in my ears. The girl in the school uniform was probably pushed by me. She fell to the ground, crawled a few steps forward, then staggered back up. Sister, sister. Help. So much blood. Hit someone. The system didn't deceive me, it removed my sense of pain. So when the car ran over me, I didn't feel much beyond that. Just hearing some strange impacts. And the sound of bones breaking and shattering. Of course, the feeling wasn't pleasant. But fortunately, the system quickly detached my entire consciousness from my body. I stood in midair, overlooking everything happening below. The girl must have been terrified. She trembled, frantically searching for her phone to call for help. Suddenly, I felt that what I did was actually quite worth it. After all, I was going to die sooner or later. But I could save a life. Dean, sitting in the car, must have realized something was wrong. He suddenly slammed on the brakes, the sports car running a few hundred meters further before finally stopping. What happened? Perhaps it was because I was no longer confined within my body. Even though there were car doors and closed windows between us, I could clearly hear the words he spoke. He had a puzzled expression, holding onto the car door, muttering to himself quietly. Hit someone? This is insane, it can't be true. He didn't even see the moment I flew over? I shook my head with a bitter smile. I was somewhat looking forward to what he would do when he got out of the car and saw me lying on the ground. But the next moment, I was disappointed once again. The phone in the car rang. It was Patricia calling. Her voice sounded weak. Dean, when are you coming over? I'm feeling so unwell. Chapter 5. The system informed me that Patricia had returned to her home country to try out the effects of traditional Chinese medicine as a complementary treatment. She had just undergone surgery abroad. Yesterday during the day, she had another consultation with a cardiologist. The hospital provided a long list of instructions and medications that needed to be taken. Some of them were quite urgent. Luckily, there was a national chain of traditional Chinese medicine stores in the city. So Dean almost immediately drove to the other end of the city without stopping. The doctor said it's best to take the medication today. With the recent surgery, the first course of treatment will be more effective. From here to the pharmacy, picking up the medication, preparing it, and rushing back to the hospital. There was also a process of decoction for the traditional Chinese medicine. It was quite a tense 3 hours. Dean's hand trembled on the car door and then he let it go. Dean, you will come back, right? Yes, of course. He placed his hand back on the steering wheel. In a gentle tone, he promised over the phone. Patricia, don't worry, you will be able to take your medication on time. This person didn't even bother to get out of the car and take a look. He did hit someone. If one could somewhat argue it was an accident before, now it was a blatant crime. I took a deep breath and exhaled heavily. Staring intensely at Dean in the car, I almost wanted to slap him. But I couldn't do anything. I could only watch helplessly as he stepped on the gas. It was as if everything was just a dream, moving forward and leaving behind. Chapter 6. I thought I would stay in the same place. However, I never thought that I would be sitting in a sports car right now, consciousness following Dean as he sped away. Since I no longer have to be bound by the physical body, wouldn't it be more interesting to see what this guy can do next? The system probably sensed my confusion. Bluntly, it said. This was the first time I heard it speak so straightforwardly, tinged with a hint of mockery. Perhaps it was quite annoyed. I couldn't help but chuckle lightly. Hey. I sighed. I really feel a bit cheated right now. There were still a few hours left until the end of the day, but this jerk ruined it all. After a moment, the system replied. Originally. If within these few hours, you could have been taken to the hospital, there would still be hope of saving you. If you wake up, your consciousness may not necessarily be unable to return. I stayed silent. It took me some time to even understand what it meant. Unconsciously, I turned to look. In the dark night, the body lying in the middle of the road was no longer visible. Actually, did it still show signs of life? I thought to myself. I kept thinking this way until Dean interrupted my thoughts. He picked up his phone again and called someone else. Willie, something has happened here, can you come and check it out for me? It's on the section behind Gulu Road at the intersection. I was replying to a message just now and didn't see the road ahead clearly. It feels like I hit something. A few hundred meters behind, there's some noise, like crying. I'm not sure if I misheard. Come and see if someone got hurt, take them to the hospital, and compensate them. I had heard the name Willie before. He should be his distant cousin. Dean's parents divorced early on. Within a few months, his father remarried, and his stepmother even got pregnant and gave birth to another son. Because of this, Dean was always a bit rebellious during his teenage years. He didn't follow rules, and often caused trouble. Most of the friends he made were not very serious. Willie was one of them. He didn't even go to college, started working early. Although he wasn't academically inclined, he had high emotional intelligence and made a mess of connections in society, one after another. Once, Dean even handed a not-so-large branch company to him to manage for a while. I frowned. What? Do they still have contact now? Chapter 7. I thought Dean had cut ties with Willie a long time ago. During the few months when Willie was in charge of the branch company, I accidentally discovered that the company's cash flow was very abnormal, seemingly involved in some shady business. After I exposed the matter, he never set foot in the company again. At that time, Willie was very disgusted with me. On the day he left, he pointed at me. Shirley, don't think you're so great just because you're Dean's girlfriend. He doesn't like you, he'll kick you out sooner or later. How you die in the future, no one will even know who will collect your body. So funny. At that time, I just felt he was talking nonsense, not choosing his words. I never expected his words to come true. Now this uneducated little thug might be the one to collect my body. The system comforted me. Host, maybe he could take me to the hospital? I shook my head. I just hated myself for not seeing through people. He entangled with childhood friends who had bad temperaments and used underhanded methods. And I still held a glimmer of hope for him. I was just too foolish. Chapter 8. Dean seemed unaware of the seriousness of the situation. Or maybe the cries of the little girl gave him a false impression. Thinking that the person who fell to the ground had stood up and shouted a few times. So he continued to instruct. Take him to the hospital for a checkup, we'll cover all the expenses. After it's done, give me a call. Oh. Do I need to praise you as a great benefactor? My eyes are about to roll to the sky. I don't want to hear anymore. I tilted my head. Closed my eyes, leaned back, and emptied my mind. I can actually fall asleep in my current state. But I only slept for just over 2 hours. Dean is really efficient. He got the prescription filled, returned to the hospital, handed the items to the attending physician, and asked anxiously. In time, right? It's not even 12 o'clock yet. Now that she has the medication, Patricia's condition should improve, right? What do you mean, not 12 o'clock? The doctor gave him a look. It's not an exam or a race. Why do you need to hand in your paper on time? I just told you to hurry up and see where you could buy the medicine, not that you had to get it today. Her illness has been going on for so long, can a day without new medication really cause a problem? The doctor's tone seemed like he was talking to an illiterate person. I was standing at the back yawning. In an instant, I woke up. I burst out laughing. Indeed, I had only heard about critically ill patients in intensive care units fighting against time. I had never seen anyone rush to buy medicine like it was a race against the clock. Dean had been pampered since childhood and hardly ever been reprimanded. After listening to the doctor, his face turned somewhat grim. After a while, he finally moved his feet and walked towards the inpatient area, gently pushing open the door to the ward. Hearing the noise, a girl sitting on the hospital bed raised her head. She was wearing light blue hospital clothes, with brown curly hair, smiling with her eyes and eyebrows raised. Dean, you're finally back. Chapter 9. I remembered, this seemed to be the first time I had seen Patricia in person. I used to see her photos quite often actually. On Dean's junior high school graduation album, among the thick stack of photo albums from his childhood, and even in his phone's photo gallery, in that collection with a pink heart-shaped symbol. In the photos, she looked like she was in her teens. And now, Patricia, much more mature, flipping through a magazine in her hand, seemed to casually ask, "Did you get the medicine?" Dean responded indifferently, sitting on the chair by the bed. Perhaps Patricia wasn't used to this cold attitude. She reached out, poking Dean's arm. "What's wrong, too tired?" Dean still didn't speak. Instead, he took out his phone and started scrolling. I tilted my head. Strange. Just now, driving recklessly on the road with a sports car, weren't you full of energy? Why act all aloof now? For a moment, the atmosphere in the ward even became somewhat awkward. It wasn't until Patricia finished flipping through the magazine, put it down by the bedside, and brought up the topic again. I'm practically becoming a medicine reference book now. I can't seem to get away from all these bottles, jars, and capsules. Dean finally looked up. Really? He interrupted Patricia. I just saw the doctor. He said your condition has actually been quite stable, and when to transfer hospitals or take medication doesn't really have much impact. Patricia, you should know that, right? I actually had something very important yesterday. Chapter 10. Dean's tone was unusually low, serious. The night seeped in through the glass window, the fluorescent light on the ceiling casting a somewhat dim light. At this moment, half of his body was immersed in the shadows. Invisible, he carried a hint of oppression. Patricia mumbled a few times, fingers curled around the corner of the blanket. Why are you suddenly so harsh? She opened her mouth, raising her voice. Oh, just proposing to your girlfriend. Forget about your childhood friend you grew up with. As soon as you have a partner, Dean, you're really turning your back on loyalty. Fine, even if you have deep feelings for her, it's been a whole day now. Has she contacted you at all? Nonsense. It's Dean who stood me up, not me. I've been waiting for him in the villa for a long time, soaking up countless sympathetic looks from friends. Why bother going to find him? But Dean seemed genuinely stunned. He lowered his head, lips pressed into a straight line. His left hand tightly gripping the phone. Patricia continued to chatter on. Look, she clearly doesn't value you that much. Someone who loves you would have called you a long time ago. Someone who doesn't care wouldn't bother. Maybe she's hoping you won't propose to her. Maybe she has better ideas and has already packed up and left. Dean, don't get too deeply involved. Stop it. Dean suddenly stood up. He let out a long sigh, showing a hint of annoyance. Rest well, I'll go sit outside for a bit. He stumbled a few steps. After steadying himself, he grabbed his coat and walked out of the ward. I followed him unsteadily. Dean looked somewhat lonely at this moment. Leaning against the wall, he picked up his phone and started scrolling. Curiously, I walked over. I discovered that it was actually the WeChat conversation page from our last chat before the proposal. I asked him if he was nervous. He replied several messages in a row. Of course, nervous, baby. But even more happy and excited. Next, we have to prepare for the wedding. Sob, 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 I love you so much, can't sleep. I glanced at Dean. Couldn't help but wonder, were those words he said back then sincere? These sentences seemed like a dream that was out of reach and untouchable. Dean's fingers hovered over the chat box. He typed a few words, then deleted them. Back and forth, after a while, he finally managed to type out a complete sentence. Baby, are you mad? Why didn't you call me? I had something yesterday, can I apologize to you later? I snorted coldly. Apologize? A late apology, nobody cares. But before I could even send that message, the phone rang. It was my good friend Lynn calling. Chapter 11. After the absurd proposal from yesterday went nowhere, I hadn't seen Lynn since then. On the phone, her urgent and angry voice came through. Dean. Where is Shirley now? Why can't I reach her at all? If something happened to her, we won't let you off the hook. Dean frowned. Shirley is missing? He even repeated. But I haven't seen her in these past 2 days? You have the nerve to say that? Lynn was the main debater for the university's speech team, even participating in national competitions and TV shows. Now, she's a somewhat famous internet celebrity in her field. At this point, her tone became even more aggressive. You haven't seen her, have you? At this time, haven't you already proposed, taken Shirley to meet your parents, or planned a trip together? Oh, my bad, I forgot. You and your childhood sweetheart are together, how could you remember her? Dean was scolded from head to toe, causing him to tighten his grip on his phone. He took a few deep breaths. His tone wasn't great either. I don't want to argue with you, but Shirley hasn't called me at all. I even wanted to ask if you took her away. He probably remembered what Patricia had said in the ward just now. So he added. If she really cared about the proposal, wouldn't she have at least asked a question by now? Dean, are you out of your mind? Lynn usually liked to play with sarcastic words when scolding, but this time she seemed really mad, throwing out all kinds of words. Unfortunately, before she could finish, the call was hung up. I looked at Dean with some sympathy. How could he be so foolish at such a young age? Was this a sign of early senility? He sat on the bench in the hospital, slowly lowering his body. The phone screen returned to the chat interface between him and me. His finger hovered over the chat box, hesitating for a moment. As if on a whim, he slowly deleted the words he had just typed out. I chuckled softly. He thought I was still alive. And that I would be sad, upset, or even jealous of him being with Patricia. Chapter 12. Dean leaned against the wall behind him, draped his coat over himself, and closed his eyes. He must have been really tired, quickly falling asleep. It was already past midnight. Considering the extra 24 hours I was given, time had run out. I summoned the system again. By now, I should have completely lost all signs of life, right? What did Willie do with my body? Can you see what's happening over there? I didn't believe that a thug like Willie would honestly take me to the hospital. So, what happened next was like a heavy rock pressing on my heart. And the system truly was another medium above the dimensions of this world. After hearing my question, it didn't respond directly. Instead, it brought up an image. In there, you can clearly see everything that happened afterwards. The little girl I rescued probably called her parents. In just a few minutes, her parents arrived. I thought they would wait a while, until the police arrived to handle the situation before leaving. But they took the child with them directly. I bit my lip and continued to look down. Next, it was Willie's car. He stopped at the intersection in a not particularly cheap luxury car. After getting out of the car, he quickly noticed the discarded me. This guy Dean really got into an accident? He even had a cigarette in his mouth. It seemed like this was just a normal little thing to him. He leisurely took a few steps, half squatted down, picked up my body, and turned it over. He stayed in that position for quite a while without moving. I even thought maybe the system was lagging. But then I heard his not-so-pleasant shout. Shirley, damn it. It's actually Shirley. Chapter 13. Who would believe it? A few days ago, they were lovers who swore eternal love, but now one of them was in a life-threatening situation because of the other. How is this possible? Did Dean make a mistake? Wasn't he devoted to this woman? Willie kept shouting. While taking out his phone, seemingly wanting to make a call to confirm with Dean again. At that moment, my hand moved slightly. It lightly turned upwards, as if tapping on his shoe. The system's voice quickly popped up. This is just a nerve reflex before death, due to physical convulsions caused by brain failure. I sighed. It didn't shock me much, to be honest. Willie, on the other hand, seemed startled. He leaned back, almost falling. Not dead, Shirley isn't dead? He reached out, grabbing my neck. The faint pulse he felt made his breathing heavier, confirming the current situation. For a moment, even I was curious. Facing someone critically injured and unconscious, what would he do? Would he abandon them, or would he extend a hand to save their life? Soon, I discovered. I couldn't expect too much from someone with such little ethics. Willie not only didn't take me to the hospital. His hand on my neck even gradually tightened. With increasing force. The scene was so vivid and real, it felt like the air was truly being sucked away from me. I couldn't help but cough a few times. Pounding my chest, I cursed. I just kicked this guy out of the company. Does he really hate me that much? The system cut off the playback. I sighed. Yes, so without being taken to the hospital, without treatment, Shirley still died. Chapter 14. I understood. Although it seemed like I died at the hands of Willie. But the root cause was Dean. It was him who missed the proposal, him who knocked me down, and him who called Willie. I looked at the young man slumped on the bench in the corridor. His brows furrowed, seemingly not sleeping soundly. Muttering something under his breath. I leaned in to listen, and found out he was calling my name. Shirley, don't be mad. How about I propose to you again? Even the system was disgusted by such absurd words. Who is this nauseating? Indeed. If you really care that much, can you still sleep now? Perhaps my sly thoughts worked a little bit. In just a few hours, as the sky was barely lightening up. Dean's phone rang once again, sounding particularly abrupt in the quiet and empty hospital corridor. He sat up abruptly, pressing the answer key. Shirley? Have you returned home? Of course, it couldn't be me. It was one of his childhood friends. Still with Shirley. Quick, check Weibo, Lynn has exposed you. You're trending now, you know. Chapter 15. The trending topic was a line. A certain well-known second-generation rich kid plays around with his fiancée, leading to her disappearance. Huh? I read it back and forth several times. This shouldn't be something Lynn came up with. On her own Weibo, the text she posted was still relatively straightforward. Third-party intervention. Friend being emotionally deceived by fiancé, runs away from home. Police have been informed. But still unable to contact, friends are worried about her safety. Below, there was also a picture. It was the landmark building of the Harris family company, located in the city center. This directly pointed out that the fiancé mentioned in the text was Dean. Suddenly, the heat was rising. Lynn's fans, onlookers, and even the hired navy of Harris's competitors in the market all flooded in. Comments below were in chaos. Call the police. What's the use of posting these things online for judgment? The key is to find the person first. Didn't you see that they said they reported to the police? This Dean is really a scumbag. Standing up the proposal event, anyone would be depressed. I suggest everyone to boycott Harris's products in the future. Lynn had millions of fans. Coupled with Dean himself being a somewhat famous second-generation rich kid, it naturally attracted attention. The more attention this Weibo post received, the more people got involved. There were even some who directly tagged the official Weibo accounts of the public security and the court. Person missing, please investigate. With the situation escalating like this, Dean couldn't sit still. He threw his coat aside and walked out. While in the elevator, Dean received a call. The screen displayed just 2 words, his father's name. Dean had a very poor relationship with his father. Ever since his father remarried, bringing in a stepmother, he rarely spoke at home. His position in the company's management was also almost entirely due to his mother's shares. After answering the call, for a moment, the narrow space was filled with a string of curses. You scoundrel, have you seen what they're saying about our company online? Do you still want to work here? Don't think you can do whatever you want just because of the shares left by your mother. As long as the board unites, they can kick you out. In a few days, I will bring your brother into the company as well. Enough. Dean abruptly interrupted. He coldly snorted. Haven't you wanted to do this for a long time? There are so many messy rumors online. Shirley couldn't have left me, she just had an argument with me. The elevator door opened. Outside stood a group of uniformed people. They were police officers. Chapter 16. Is it Dean? The police officer standing at the outermost part took out his identification. Last night, you were speeding and hit a young woman, resulting in a hit and run. The victim no longer shows any signs of life. Finally, the moment arrived. I glanced at the time. It was only a little after 7. I have to say, the speed of our police investigation and action is quite fast. Dean shook his head, his face suddenly darkening. Hit and run resulting in death? I clearly called for help to come and deal with it. He took a step forward, in a questioning manner. That's an accomplice. The next moment, the police officer directly grabbed his wrist. Do you have any questions? Well, we also need you to go and identify the body. Dean didn't understand why the police needed him, the perpetrator, to identify the deceased. He was just angry and kept complaining. Until he entered the morgue at the police station, he asked. Can't we settle this? Give me the contact information of the victim's family, I think compensating them should be acceptable. The police officer coldly snorted. Unfortunately, according to our investigation, that girl's parents passed away a long time ago. She had quite a few friends, and even a fiancé. However, the fiancé went to see another girl on the day of the proposal, and the girl disappeared. Dean furrowed his brows, seeming to realize something. He opened his mouth, but in the end, said nothing. Step by step, he followed along until he reached the long table placed in the corner. It seemed that at this moment, he finally remembered something. He raised his head, looking at the police officer. What's the point of me identifying the body? I didn't see anything clearly at the time. Even if I did, I wouldn't recognize her. How could you not recognize her? The police officer rolled his eyes. Weren't you planning the proposal just a few days ago? Chapter 17. I hid far in the back, watching this absurd drama unfold. On the silver metal table was my body. Covered, only a vague outline visible. What do you mean? Dean's Adam's apple rolled twice, his voice dry, as if forced out. What do you mean by that? His hand was originally placed on the white cloth covering the outside, but now it began to tremble, hovering in the air, still not daring to unveil it. The police were originally recording something in their notebook. After a while, he raised his head and saw that Dean was still in the same position, finally getting impatient. He reached out and lifted it up. Dean, this is the person you hit while speeding at the intersection of Gulu Road last night. Have you seen her? Do you know her? Do you know who she is? Looking at Shirley lying there motionless, pale as a sheet, I truly felt it for the first time. I was really dead. It was a death marked by bruises and a sorry state. These extra few hours were just the system lending them to me. I glanced at Dean. Impossible. He shouted, covering his face, seemingly unable to look. How is it possible? How could it be Shirley? Are you trying to say that I hit? Hit. The last part, Dean's voice grew smaller, and he never finished the sentence. There's surveillance footage at the intersection. Witnesses have also contacted us. It was you, in your sports car speeding far beyond the limit, who ran over the girl who was supposed to be your wife. Chapter 18. Willie was, of course, arrested. After all, back then, I still had some breath left. He choked me, then threw me into a desolate grassland, letting me slowly die there. When Dean found out about this, he staggered back 2 steps. He seemed to lose all strength. Reaching out to grasp the edge of the table, he slipped and fell. Suddenly, he knelt down beside my body. Yes. I could have been saved. If only he had stopped the car back then and rushed me to the hospital. But what did he do? He called some thug instead, then hurried off to get drugs for his sweetheart. Even if she didn't take the medicine, it wouldn't have mattered. Shirley. Dean raised his hand, as if wanting to touch my face. I really don't know, how could I have done such a thing to you? He wanted to apologize. But I just felt dirty, not wanting any more connection with him. Fortunately, at this moment, the door was kicked open with a loud bang. My friends came in. Chapter 19. Standing at the front was Lynn. We had known each other for many years, and she had recently posted a Weibo online. The police had unsurprisingly informed her as well. Dean. She shouted. Rushing over, she grabbed his hand tightly. Are you sick in the head? Can you stop touching her? Usually, when these two met, there was always a tense atmosphere. Either cold stares or arguments. This time, Lynn used all her strength, reached out her hand, and slapped him hard. Once, twice. And again. Until the police stopped her. Dean stood there motionless. You despicable, shameless, damned murderer. That woman, who shares your despicable ways, would die without seeing you, right? But my Shirley died because of you. Do you have a conscience? You should go straight to hell right now. As Lynn spoke, her voice choked with tears. She even ignored the police trying to restrain her and tried to grab Dean's neck. Dean lowered his head. His voice was low. Yes, I should pay with my life. Pay with your life? Lynn's raised hand slowly fell. She glared at him fiercely. How can you easily talk about death? I will find the best legal team to make you rot in jail for the rest of your life. I will arrange the most vicious, violent cellmates for you, just like you, without any boundaries, to torment you for life. Extra Chapter 1. After the incident was over, the system and I had another long conversation. It asked me if I wanted to return to the original world. I didn't have great feelings for the real world. Even though I had parents, my father was an alcoholic, a gambler, frequently abusive, and my mother always tried to appease him. Once, my father owed a large sum of money to some big shot. The person came to collect, holding a huge axe, ready to strike my father. In that moment, my mother knelt down. Don't touch my man. We have no money. If it's really necessary, take the girl away. I stared blankly at my mother, feeling like I had just met this person today. When she came to pull me, I shook her hand away. And jumped from the 7th floor. I don't remember what my last conscious thought was, probably very painful. So, please don't let me go back, I really don't want to. The system paused for a moment, seemingly searching for data. I tilted my head. Can I have a different identity? In this mission world, besides Dean, I'm somewhat reluctant to leave my other friends. Chapter 2. After persistent requests, the system and the higher-ups actually designed a new identity for me. I could stay in the place where Shirley used to live. Because I originally studied journalism in university. So, this time, the character's profession was a reporter. On the first day at the newspaper office, a bunch of people were waving water cups in front of me. Just when I thought I had nothing to do with it, the team leader walked up to me. Slapped several newspapers on the table. The newbie, don't know what's the hottest news right now? Take a good look at the materials, you'll be busy in a few days. I picked up the newspaper. The bold headlines were particularly eye-catching. Dean may face life imprisonment. Harris family involved in tax evasion and money laundering business, stocks suspended. Dean's father publicly criticizes his eldest son, stating that the true heir has always been his youngest son. I furrowed my brows, flipping through it bit by bit. Only then did I realize why Willie despised me so much. It was because the small subsidiary he was in charge of at the time happened to be handling some of Dean's shady businesses. But in just half a year, it made profits more than 10 times the normal revenue. Yet, in the end, I messed it up. And got him kicked out. Patricia's situation wasn't good either. Previously, a large part of her medical expenses had been covered by the Harris family. Now with Dean in prison, the Harris family was struggling to stay afloat. I heard her surgeries and medications were delayed, her condition had truly worsened. Now, it wasn't just in the newspapers. The internet was also filled with criticism towards the Harris family. Not only bankrupt him and make him pay, but also make him pay with his life. Why does this scum even live? It's simply a waste of air. Killed his own fiancée, and also tax evasion. Can we not punish him for all his crimes together? I scrolled through Weibo for a while, feeling confused. Just then, the team leader walked over and glanced at me. Are the materials almost ready? I nodded. Suddenly, I thought of something and asked. Who is Dean's prosecuting attorney? Can't believe you're thinking about that. The team leader smiled rare. For this kind of public prosecution case, a lawyer is usually designated, but I heard that a friend of the deceased has hired someone, and the litigation team is quite strong. Word on the street is that he's going to spend his whole life in jail, probably won't be easy. There might even be someone trying to get back at him in prison. It must be Lynn. I lowered my head, not saying anything more. The team leader glanced at me, placed the cup on the table, and suddenly said. In a few days, our newspaper has an opportunity to interview Dean. You'll come with me. Chapter 3. On the day of the interview, the team leader was late for some reason. I went in alone. After waiting for a while, the manager brought Dean out. Looking through the narrow bars, he seemed much thinner, his face somewhat sunken, heavy dark circles under his eyes surfaced. Do you really have to interview me? Dean sat down, his tone weary. Are you going to strip me of even this right? You don't have the right. The person next to him spoke coldly. I flipped open the interview booklet prepared by the team leader, with some questions already written. Was it premeditated murder? Did you have an argument with Shirley before that day? What was the relationship between you two really like? Dean kept his head down and said nothing. He seemed exhausted by this kind of interview a long time ago. He had already made up his mind to remain silent. The system changed my face. I turned into a tall, sharp professional image, unrecognizable to Dean. So, I simply put down the prepared notebook and spoke freely. I know it wasn't premeditated murder. Shirley was trying to save a little girl. On the day the police arrested you, the little girl's family also came over. The girl's situation was not disclosed by the police. After they left holding the child, they went to the hospital for a full checkup. They also made another call to the police after leaving. There was still no sound from the opposite side. But Dean finally looked up. He hesitantly glanced at me, probably thinking that I was a reporter with connections to the police and knew a lot of inside information. I continued. An argument? There wasn't one, after all, you didn't say a word and just stood up Patricia to go find her. Dean clenched his fists, staring at me intently. One last question. I picked up the pen. But with the last question, I didn't know how to answer it. Dean, I never quite understood you. But I know, Shirley truly loved you once. On that night of her solo proposal, after everyone left, she waited for you alone until the very last second of midnight. She would write about the future and the dreams of your life together in her diary. And many, many things, little details you don't know. Unfortunately, you're not worthy. It was you who killed the one who loved you the most. I finished saying these words in one breath. I felt like there was nothing more to do here. Closing the notebook, ready to leave, but then I heard a loud clang. Dean gripped the bars tightly, stood up abruptly, and stared at me without blinking. His eyes were almost bloodshot. He opened his mouth, his voice hoarse and trembling. Shirley, are you back? Are you back? I smiled, turned around. You better serve your time well, living in repentance every day.